Welcome, everybody, to the Making Awesome podcast. This is episode, 211? Jeez. At some point, we should just stop counting because it just sounds terrible that we've done 211 episodes of this. But I've got my buddy Mitch, which we were chatting before we started, where I'm fairly certain Mitch has won for the most expensive background that we've ever had on a show. This is a real background. He is actually in a machine shop. But we have Mitch here from Polar Filament, an awesome made in America 3D filament company. You guys should check him out. But we're going to be talking all about the Bambu RFID system because it is finally cracked. And it matters quite a bit to you as both a user and a manufacturer. So first off, Mitch, I need the Backstreet Boys from you once again. I know not everyone has seen you before, but some of them have. So give us your background and we'll go from there.
Yeah, sounds good. So I'm Mitch. I'm one of the founders of Polar Filament. We're just a made in the US brand of Polar Filament. Outside of that, though, we make for a bunch of other brands in the US as well. There's a pretty good chance that if you're ever buying anything that says that it's filament made in the US, it's probably coming out of our building. So we do, I'd say most of our work that we do is going to be like toll production. So with that being said, I try to be pretty open about the whole filament making process. A lot of people are pretty like locked down, but in my opinion, we're just kind of like melting plastic, and I don't think it's that complex, and the secrets are not that crazy to somebody else. So if you ever have any questions about how filament's made or some of the stuff that we do, I'm generally pretty open about that. And one of the things that I would say is kind of our bread and butter is that the reason I'm out here today is usually on weekends. I come out and machine parts for the filament line. So a lot of the filament lines that we're using is just stuff that's hand built by me, which makes it really easy to like come up with an idea and be like, hey, here's how we can make something better. But that would be a giant metal part or something. How do we make that? So I've been like picking up machining on the side and stuff, kind of like an apprenticeship. So I come out on weekends and stuff like that and work on all sorts of little projects. But I think the hot topic that I'm here for today is not directly related to filament, but it's more of RFID. So for context on this, everyone's probably heard about putting an RFID tag on filament. It's really a novelty. I mean, in my opinion, it's kind of a novelty. It's ease of life. It's like makes your life a little bit easier. It's more convenient to like load up filaments. But the reason it's never really taken off is because you kind of have to control an entire ecosystem. So my problem is I think it's cool for whatever, just personal reasons. And I would love to sell filament with RFID tags on it. But the problem is if I put a tag on it, then somebody else needs to agree on that tag and be able to read it. And since I don't make printers, I don't really have a reason to do it. So I've kind of taken this little project on of just saying like, hey, what would it take to get this out in the world? If it's an idea that people like, take it and run with it. If it's an idea that people think is stupid, then let it die. But it seems that as this is building up hype for it, there's a lot of people that have ideas, have a lot of project ideas. So like there's a filament dryer company that reached out and they're like, hey, drying is really complex stuff. Well, I shouldn't say complex. It's like, if you make a mistake, you can ruin an entire spool of filament, which to a hobbyist sucks if you forget to change your temperatures. If you dry it for too long, bad things happen. And they're like, man, if we could just take that tag, pop it in the dryer, it reads the tag, it knows what the drying information is supposed to be, and it just sets the right temp and the right time, then you're good to go. So when I heard projects like that, I was like, you know what? I don't know what I don't know. If this technology was available to the hobbyist, what new things would happen with it? So I've kind of taken that on as like a little pet project to, I guess, bring RFID out into mainstream. And then the one company that is the most notable for doing RFID is Bambu. They make filament, they make printers, and there's a whole group that's dedicated to basically learning how all of that works, learning how the tags work, learning how the printers work, figuring out like why they're doing it the way that they're doing it. And Bambu infamously locks down a lot of their stuff. So in order to kind of read it, you definitely have to go in a roundabout way.
And reading it has been something that's been around for a while now. Like we've known how to read and understand it, but up until just recently, writing it has been pretty much impossible because of their signature that Bambu puts alongside of it. But recently, that has been kind of dealt with as well, correct?
Kind of. There's a lot of stuff that goes into this. So the thing
Yes.
that's been ready for a while is we were able to like dump the contents of a tag, which is a pretty complex thing. You'd have to
Mhm.
take the tag or the filament itself, you took the printer, and then you stuck a device in between it, and it would listen to the communication
Yep.
because when you would load it up, the printer would say, "Hey, what's on your tag?" And you're able to like learn the information from that. Through that, you can actually do a pretty I'm going to call it a complex. It's simple in the RFID world, but complex to the average 3D printer user. You can basically figure out the encryption keys that are needed to read data. So if you ever want to read any data that's on the tag, you have to figure out what those 16 encryption keys are. So because of that, that's where we've been for a long time now. That just means that you need like some sort of RFID development kit, usually a Proxmark 3, which is not something the average person has.
No.
And then you have to do a pretty
No.
complex like setup. It's really a giant pain. Like if you want to read a tag, you got to get your printer, you got to get the tag, you got to do all this stuff, you got to run all these scripts, you got to do a lot of setup. It has never been easy or trivial. And most of that is due to those keys. Um, so the thing that was most recently discovered was the KDF, or the key derivation function, which is basically saying, hey, how do we know what keys this particular tag is? Because they're unique for every single tag. You can't just figure it out once.
So wait.
Um,
Hold on. Unique
yeah,
for every single tag. So if I have
yep.
2 rolls of Bambu orange PLA, they're different.
Yeah, and actually the
Okay.
two tags that are on each side of it, you get a spool that has two tags. Each one of those are different. So even the same physical spool, you have to use a different KDF or sorry, different set of keys.
That's so wait. So the machine could actually theoretically know if the spool is put in backwards.
Yeah, but they don't actually record that. Like that info is not on the tag, but nothing is stopping it from being on the tag.
Because
So
like
yeah, you could.
there's a lot of value to DRM. We've talked about this before. In fact, I feel like we talked about this with you as well at some point previously. But there is a lot of value to DRM. There's the evil side of DRM, which is you get to use our filament and nobody else's. But so far, Bambu's just been playing with like, look, you put our filament in the machine, it's going to auto update. And as a filament manufacturer, that's a big deal if you could also get that with Polar's filament, so that as soon as you stick a roll of Polar filament into a Bambu, it's Polar filament, it's this color, and it's this material. You're ready to go. And that's pretty great if you can make that happen.
Yeah, it lets us work on like the profile and tune it in. Because I think that's one of the
Right.
things people like about Bambu printers. Like the one thing that somebody says about Bambu printers is it just works.
Yep.
They've really taken out a lot of the guesswork. But they've done it honestly in a way that like doesn't limit you either. So like if you say I don't like the defaults, you can still change them. It's not like the big industrial printers and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So
where you don't get
um,
options.
yeah, and if you want to use third-party stuff, the RFID tags don't prevent you from using third-party stuff, so you can
Right.
still use all of that.
For now.
It's just a real convenience factor that people say, oh, it's cool to know I still can do it on my own. But then like a lot of the people that use it they just use the defaults, and then next thing you know, you just cut out an entire process of the whole printing process. So honestly, my goal is not necessarily to get filament that works on a Bambu printer. It's to make it that our filament as well as anyone else's filament can work on any printer is kind of like my goal. Like this is more of a personal project than it is a work project. Yeah, of course, I'd like to sell some filament. But this, once again, is something that only works if everybody's on board with it.
And everyone has to play in the same standard, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Real quick, Steve Builds for the 18 months member for basic support. Thank you, sir. Greatly appreciated. He says howdy to everybody. We did get a question from Duff, said maybe discuss the private/public keys first, because that's fair. That's something that we should probably discuss a little bit further and explain the difference between a private key, public key, and how those function.
Yeah, so there's reading the tags and writing the tags. So like I was saying, the reading is what really just became trivial with that key derivation function, which literally means that I could grab an Arduino and an off-the-shelf RFID scanner, write like 4 lines of code, and now read the contents of the tag. That is what was most recently discovered, which is huge because now you can add it to a third-party printer.
Right.
Writing is a little bit more complex. So this is something that is probably not going to happen if I had to take a guess because of the tag being signed. So basically, the contents of a tag tell you all about the spool itself. It tells you the color, it tells you the diameter, it tells you when it was made. It tells you the drying temperatures and stuff like that. And then the very last chunk of data that's on there is a signature. And basically what that means is we certify that everything above this point is authentic and it's genuine. And if you change anything on the inside of that, then that signature becomes invalid and you'd have to regenerate a new signature over that new set of data. So signatures work with a private and public key. So the private key is what Bambu themselves has. So when they take all of that data on that tag, they have this magic key that will be able to take all of that data and spit out a signature. And then a public key is something that you share openly with the world, which is how somebody can then validate whether or not the data is real. So I can take that data if I have the public key and say, hey, I have this giant chunk of stuff with a signature at the end. Is it authentic or has it been tampered with? So then I, as a person, can say, hey, lo, it actually looks like this has been tampered with. Something's not right. You can't necessarily tell what is wrong. You just know that it's not 100% authentic.
Right.
So the public key is what lives on every single 3D printer. The 3D printer itself wants to tell, is this tag genuine? Is it real? And has it been trusted by Bambu? So that public key lives somewhere in the firmware of the printer, and that's what allows it to test if it's authentic. The private key, if Bambu is doing this properly, should never, ever, ever leave their doors. They have that under lock and key, and it's private. It's supposed to stay that way.
Yep.
The public key is something that theoretically should be able to be dumped from the firmware, but really no one seems to care about that because from like the third party world, no one cares if a tag is authentic Bambu. Basically, you can already read the data itself and just ignore the signature. You don't really care if it's 100% authentic or if it's been tampered with if you're building a third party device. So that's basically work that doesn't really have a whole lot of payoff. So it's knowable, but just hasn't really been pursued.
Yeah, it's like the goal is not to clone Filament and say it's Bambu brand. The goal is to have it auto recognize that it is a different brand, no matter what brand it is. So those of you that run 3D printing businesses, a lot of you are opting to choose Bambu printers because, like Mitch said, when they work, damn it, they just work. But there is that extra level of if you're not running Bambu materials, you now have to verify so that a part that you thought was PETG and you accidentally loaded PLA into it and your slicer was accidentally sliced for PLA, or maybe your machine thought it was PETG and it was PLA and you never changed it. It removes that level of user error and says, hey, it's PLA, it's running the Polar, the Jesse, the Prushament, it's running whomever's custom profiles or generic profiles, but the machine will auto recognize it. So it removes that level of problems. It's odd because most RFID systems historically have not been this locked down, right? A lot of people in the chat are talking about DaVinci, which was an EEPROM style, and all you literally had to do was just reprogram it with an Arduino because they weren't signed. It didn't matter. You could just reprogram them with whatever you wanted, and it enabled you to rewind the spools and reprogram the chip that it was full, and you were good to go. But Bambu has done it in such a way that it can only be their materials, and that's where this open standard is pushing for, correct?
Yeah. So once again, like my goal is not to get third-party filament necessarily on the Bambu printer. It's going to be entirely Bambu's choice as to whether or not they remove that signature restriction, which if they see a business case for it, then they do. And if they don't, then they don't. So I'm trying to like pursue like third-party printers. Just being like, hey, I mean, I've talked to Creality. I know a lot of the Prusa folks quite well, but I haven't talked to them about this in particular yet. But like, being able to just have like basically, do we want RFID on printers?
Right.
And actually one big case for this, everyone always talks about like ease of use and like I don't really care. The features that you gain out of RFID are just not, they don't matter to me. From my end, I work with a lot of industrial customers and we have to basically formulate a plastic that is exactly the same as whatever plastic they were using before.
Yep.
For whatever reason, I've tried arguing and saying, hey, reslice your stuff for a new plastic. I promise it'll work better. And they're like, absolutely not. Off the table. We're not going to touch it.
Yeah,
So
they're very much a we're not messing with the new stuff. We just like our old system. Match it, please, and thank you.
Exactly. So we
Yeah,
reverse engineer these plastics, which takes a lot of work and it's a lot of volume to do something like that, just because somebody doesn't want to reslice whatever the heck they're using. So like if all of the temperature profiles and speed profiles were instead saved on an RFID tag instead of like raw in the slice file itself, then it should be plug and play. You should
right.
swap something up, even if they're minorly different. So it's one of those things that like for most people, I get it. It's not going to be that big of a feature. You're just like, all right, it takes 2 seconds to reslice a thing. Most of the time, if you print something, you're printing it once and never again. You don't care if you're slicing it for something different. But there's a lot of people out there where that's just not an option.
Yeah, and most people don't have the equipment needed to generate the RFID tags. I know that to some extent, normal, non encrypted, and all that, a flipper will get you like 95% of the way through. But when we're starting to deal with this, sounds like a hash of sorts where they have like a rolling key that they're utilizing, but it's just being encoded onto each RFID whenever it happens to get hit, right? It's just odd to me that they would go through this much effort to lock it down. And I'll be curious to see, because now obviously we have that X1 carbon. We don't have anything from Creality yet. I know Anycubic is releasing a, call it what it is, it's an AMS clone that I believe has RFID in it as well. Do we know if the Big Tree Tech one that they just released has RFID readers in it? Big Tree Tech doesn't make filament, so I'm not certain if there's a
Yeah,
reason for it, but
I haven't checked yet. And I'm one of the things about the open source standard too, you're mentioning Flipper. So in this
mhm.
case, for the Bambu stuff, with the most recent update, a Flipper now can do it. It previously could not.
No kidding.
Literally anything can. If it can read an RFID tag at all, it's going to be able to read Bambu tags now. Um, but the other thing is part of this open source standard is kind of throwing everything else out the window and saying, hey, what makes sense? And one thing that has been proposed that is being discussed right now is instead of using the specific type of chip that Bambu uses, which is called a MyFair chip,
Okay.
I don't want to say you need a proprietary reader or anything to do it. Most readers that you're going to buy are going to be able to read MyFair chips, but NFC is very similar to MyFair, and NFC you can read from like an Android phone. You can read and write from an Android phone.
Yep.
So someone has proposed instead of using MyFair to use these NFC tags, because then people at home can read and write data from their own phones if they want to program the chips.
Dude, and I would love that. Not only so that I could program the weight, right? Because, like, as dumb as that is, when you're running a farm, knowing how much weight is left on your roll without like needing something to actively measure the weight, right? Say, okay, I just ran a 250-gram part, period. I can take 255 grams off of my spool and know that I've got a little bit of extra. That would be so incredibly valuable, even further if the machine could do it for me. But minimally, so that I don't accidentally fat finger. Literally, this has happened to me on my Bambu when I wanted to hit PLA and I hit PETG. I didn't realize it. I had also forgotten to change the material over from PETG to PLA in the slicer. So when I went to actually print it, I thought everything was great, and it very much wasn't. Now, in that particular case, it doesn't really hurt PLA all that much. The opposite, where you're trying to print PETG at PLA temperatures, often doesn't go very well and can result in, well, pain. Often it results in a little bit of pain. That's really the goal here. The goal is to make it easier for the end consumer. And I mean, heck, if they could even read and write their own tags, that would be just a huge value, right?
Yeah, and I'm going to throw one more thing at you since you brought up the weight thing.
Mm-hmm.
Unintended, maybe intended use of RFID is since a lot of systems use a single reader, you've got this spool that's spinning around, and every time that it passes, you get a new read on this. And if you know the core width of your spool itself, which is one of the things that is stored on the open source standard list, then basically the faster that this thing is spinning around, that means the closer you are to an empty spool. So doing some math, you can say, hey, the printer knows how much filaments it's pushing out. So like if it pushes out 100 centimeters of filament or 100 millimeters of filament, I mean, and it was one rotation, then we know one rotation is 100 millimeters. We know how to predict how much filament is left on your actual roll until you're actually empty. So that is another little cool use of RFID. Somebody told me that the classic AMS does that to estimate usage. But the AMS Lite actually has, instead of it being an individual spot that it like passes by each time, it uses a giant coil that is about the size of a spool. So it can basically read the tag anywhere within that zone. So the moment that you put it on there, it knows exactly where it is. So you lose that functionality with the AMS Lite because it can't tell where in a rotation it is.
Well,
Unless
it's
they
the
do, I don't
light,
know.
so
Yeah,
hey, you're
exactly.
choosing the light version, you're gonna lose a little feature. But those machines are also like the A1 combo is the better part of $1,000 less than an X1 Carbon. So, you know, if you lose a little bit of functionality to save $1,000, I have a feeling the vast majority of users are probably going to be okay with that at the end of the day. Bearded Printer, thank you for the $5. I guess I should, remind people that we are doing these streams ad-free. If you do want to kick a couple of bucks, that'd be awesome. We would greatly appreciate it. That way you guys get a theoretically ad-free experience, as long as YouTube doesn't decide to mess with that at all. Don't do that, please, because we like having ad-free streams. Retro by law said, I was wondering why the printer did not record the amount used and would tell me the amount I still have left, and if I needed to swap a spool or add another spool to the AMS to avoid wait time. Because, like, I feel like this wouldn't be that difficult on the software side, and I think there was a version, if not the most recent version of X1 Plus enables that, but their whole commitment has gone out the window, so I'm not very pleased with them at the moment. They chose to not go fully open source and all of that jazz, so that's going to be what it's going to be. But in this case, you guys are also to some extent working with Bambu on this, right? Or attempting to work with Bambu on this. So they recognize this isn't, if you will, like a hostile takeover. It's more of, hey, we're just trying to understand it a little bit better to give people a little bit more utilization out of their machines. Am I moving in the right direction for that?
Yeah, so the X1 Plus firmware and the RFID research has a lot of overlap in the people that are working on them.
Yes.
So a huge chunk of that is the same group of people. From my end, I get why Bambu did what they did, because it's been now like 2 years since they've launched this thing, and they've essentially had exclusivity in there. So
yeah,
of course, it's not in their best interest to open source something. Agree or disagree? I mean, it's a smart business move.
No, it is. It is a smart business move, and given the jacket you're wearing, we can even talk about the Core 1 not being open source and what that kind of means, but we can get to that a little bit later.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of the writing to the RFID tag, I can at least tell you why Bambu hasn't done that. Once again, it's just because of those signatures. So if you change any data, it needs to be re-signed. And that dangerous part is that private key that creates those signatures should never leave the door, because if it does, that means that the printer itself knows the private key in order to be able to write tags. And if it knows the private key, that means that it can be extracted from the printer itself. So it's big, like if you're trying to keep things locked down, that defeats the whole purpose. So if that was on the printer, people would be tearing it apart to find where it was. But with an open source tag, if you don't care about those signatures, then nothing is stopping you from writing to that data. Or even more so, you get to choose what the data of a signature is on. So you could also say like, hey, this portion of the tag is outside of the signed data. We don't really care what it is. It's kind of scratch area. So you could always record stuff that way. There are a finite number of writes that you can do to it as well. So you can't write indefinitely. So the precision that you do might wear out the tag if you're trying to be too precise. But if you're doing like once it's start up and once it's shut down or something like that, that's fine.
But also, like, RFID tags are pretty cheap. If there was a way to integrate within the system and sign your own ones that didn't have the Bambu signature but had a signature attached to it, right, that they recognized, that you could just make new tags as they start to wear out rather than just pray that they don't wear out. Have you ever had any wear out? I've never had, but I guess I
I
don't
have.
use bamboo filament very often.
No, I haven't had Bambu. I mean, you get infinite reads or essentially infinite reads. You have a finite number of writes.
Right.
But doing all the RFID development I do, especially because I automate a lot of it, like sometimes I just have a few too many loops. The next thing I know, I looped over it a couple thousand times and I killed it. So you can do that. Same with like EEPROM. You get a finite number of writes. Even SD cards, you get a finite number of writes before it stops working, which is a surprisingly low number of writes. So that's why you can't like use SD cards reliably as like power loss protection. Keep writing to the SD card, hey, I'm here, hey, I'm here, hey, I'm here, telling you what portion of the print you're through. You're going to kill the SD card pretty quick. So,
yeah.
But using it how it's intended and drag and dropping files once per print, you can use it for your entire lifetime and never hit the maximum number of writes.
Now, I'd be curious because, you know, the original X1 Plus firmware, you needed a machine running 1.7.0 or newer, and it was a 3MF exploit. So it utilized an exploit within the 3MF system where the machine would effectively unpack any 3MF file that was given to it. Now, all of a sudden, you can send it a malicious 3MF file, and you now have access, right? That is my understanding of the initial traversal methods of X1 Plus, and my machine is running, when it's not running X1 Plus 1.4.1, my machine is running like 2-year-old factory firmware, but X1 Plus, since I loaded off an SD card, enables it to be running the latest possible firmware. I'd be curious, I don't know if you have access to a machine of this, let's go with vintage, but if you want to poke around, I'm happy to send you, you know, the full logs and like the full dump of the machine memory, because that's not normally something that you can pull from these machines anymore, to my understanding.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to this, but I'm not very involved with the X1 Plus stuff. So a lot of the stuff I'm hearing is going to be like a summary from somebody else. But I had thought that, yeah, that was where the original one came from. It was definitely like a hackable way. And then Bambu patched it. And there was a lot of like upset people that were like, hey, you just patched it. Now we can't do it. And once again, you needed that type of firmware. But I thought afterwards, after talking to the actual X1 Plus team, that they decided to create a way to flash your own firmware on it in a one-way scenario. So basically, once you flash custom firmware on it, it's essentially like jailbroken, and it will never become unjailbroken after you jailbroken it.
Yeah, that's the and technically, even so, like I was one of the initial testers for X1 Plus. I have an air gap variant of it that was never publicly released, which is still something that I violently disagree with, but whatever, I'm not going down that road. The reason they didn't release it is because they were able to work with Bambu to do this one-way street, but it does require you to sign away your rights, which is the exact reason I don't agree with it. But from the even my version, if you know where to look, there are Easter eggs that the machine was cracked at some point during its time. My machine's well outside of its warranty anyways, so I just don't care anymore. But certainly, yeah, they decided to work with the company. And I would say, again, from a business perspective, that's the right move. But from the initial project, things have changed.
Yeah, I don't know that. Once again, I haven't pushed too much into this because it doesn't matter to me. I'm coming at this from the filament end. I want people to be able to use filament. I just deemed that like if somebody has to mod their printer to be able to use my filament, it's not going to happen.
Right.
So I've kind of like ignored that. You're going to get a handful of people that do that, but like usually the people that buy our filament are like, hey, I just got this brand new printer for Christmas and I want to try my first ever 3D prints with your filament. And I'm like, before you do that, here's how to change your firmware. Like I'm not going to go that route. Honestly, from that end though, from what I've heard, signing away your rights, whatever, if you want to call it that, I'm like, I think it's fair. I think it's very cool, honestly, that Bambu had a lockdown firmware that didn't let you change anything about it and was okay with somebody saying, okay, if you want to write your own stuff for this, you can. It's out of our hands. And the way that they did that is kind of just like means to an end in my opinion, but like being able to actually have it sanctioned, I think is a pretty cool move.
Yeah, that the specifics of giving up the rights from Bambu's perspective, I totally get it, right? Why should they warranty something? And Prusa does the exact same thing, to be fair.
Yep.
To load custom firmware onto a Prusa board, you have to cut a part of the motherboard. It is effectively the same thing, except it is a physical maneuver rather than a digital signature. And so, like, from a business standpoint, I get it because they don't want to have to support something where you as the user can likely and potentially mess things up, right? So I understand that. I just feel like the entire project got away from my understanding of what it was intended to be. So that's why I'm a bit salty about it, but, you know, whatever. Anyone that likes Bambu hasn't made it this far into the video, most likely anyways, so it's fine. They're going to leave nasty comments. It is what it is. They're leaving nasty comments in the X1 Plus Discord already, which is hilarious. But hey, it's going to be what it's going to be. My goal for all of this, though, is to look at kind of similar for what yours seems to be in my view, which is we want a consistent standard, right? We want all the machines that have RFID to work on a consistent standard and allow for other brands.
Yeah, I just want something that's buildable that you can build off of and exchange. Because like things are going to happen. Somebody brought up this morning and they're like, hey, rainbow colored filaments. How is that going to be stored on an RFID tag? And I'm like, I haven't even thought about that. I mean, but the important part is that it can change when something new comes out. So you can make a tag that works with everything that exists today, but I'm thinking about the stuff that is going to exist a year from now or 2 years from now. And you don't know what that is. So you can't say, oh, we're just going to allow up to 10 colors because we don't see a reason why filament would have more than 10 colors. I'm like, okay, that solves kind of like this intermediary problem, but like, who knows what's going to come out next? I have no idea. So that's why I want it to be like, I want it to be open source to say, hey, if enough of the community gets behind this and says, things have changed, there's new things that we didn't know about when we wrote this, we think that this should be modified, changed, deleted, added, something like that. And then everybody can benefit from it. So that's kind of the tricky thing. So right now, for example, nothing is stopping you from using a Bambu tag now on an Ender 3. So you can officially do that change now. But basically, if you say, hey, I want to add support for multicolor or for a rainbow filament, you can't because you get the tag that you get. And that is what it is. So that's really where the standard comes from.
Okay. We had a couple of donations. I want to shout them out. Max H says, I'll help with the ad free. Winslow Joy says, by offering to the ad-free stream. And one that you've asked me about, and I kind of sidestepped it because I didn't know the answer to it either. JL Stern said, so, I found that bubbly PETG Mitch gave me to send to you, Grant. Work got crazy and it got tossed with some others and I forgot about it. I'll send it out tomorrow. How long is it? That's been a minute.
Yeah, that was.
We're going to make a cool lamp with that stuff.
Yeah, you'll have to see how it works. I think there's a handful of people that I gave that stuff out to, and everyone said it printed just fine. So I'm really curious about it. I mean, it was just not dried enough, but apparently it didn't cause as many problems as I thought it would.
Yeah, I've. Did you see the Print Fix Friday that came out yesterday or 2 days ago?
No, not the one 2 days ago. No.
Okay. I had a Bambu Obsidian high flow nozzle clog up. Don't torch them. Don't do it. Don't do it. And then don't try to push the clog through because you will pop out the insert and that insert is under some pressure. And I found it burned into the carpet in my garage, which is fine. I don't really care about that carpet. It was old carpet from the house anyways, but yeah, I forgot how slow the Bambu is stock compared to with those high flow Obsidian nozzles. Like that stuff alone would be super cool. So I'm looking at RFID as a means to help people to do more than just filament, like machine maintenance, right? Think about, I don't know how small you can make an RFID tag, but maybe it's on like the little, it's like Prusa nozzles come in these, they're the same cases that end mills come in. They've got a little QR code, which I'm fairly certain is for a Prusa internal thing. I've never actually scanned it. If someone wants to, it's never going to focus on that. But if someone wants to try, I can put a photo of this up later. But it would be really awesome if there was an RFID on this and I could touch it to somewhere on the machine. Now the machine updates what size nozzle it's running or what type of nozzle that it's running to tell me if there's a mismatch of my nozzle size or my volumetric flow rate. Super duper awesome if it could auto adjust it as well. Those are all things where I see RFID being a massive quality of life feature and not so much a DRM thing anymore.
Yeah, you're probably never going to get it for that just because of size. Most of an RFID tag is going to be the antenna itself. You got to put a certain amount of wire somewhere. So like you can make them in stickers because they take up space, but heat is going to be your other big factor. So if you're putting it on a nozzle, it's going to get real hot. It's going to probably not do so great for the tag.
That's why I'm thinking about on the case.
Oh, on the case,
right?
The case.
So I can tap the case, and that's the nozzle that I'm putting on the machine. Now, of course, that requires me, if I do change it, to put the right nozzle size back in the case. So there is, of course, now this, again, 200-pound gorilla operating machine idiot problem. Then there is the machine not doing what it should problem.
Right. Yeah, and honestly, one of the things that's a huge influencer of the open source standard is making it really easy for a computer. So one of the most expensive parts of RFID is not actually the filament itself. The tags can cost anywhere between like 8 and 15 cents or something like that. But it's going to be the RFID reader itself on whatever you decide to put on it. Now, it's only a couple of bucks, but when you're talking about printers that you can buy these days for under $100, adding $4 or $5 to a printer is huge. It's like 20% or something like that. That's math doesn't work, but you get the point.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I understand where you're going. Yeah.
So, and then also there's expensive in terms of computing power. So like the Ender 3, the originals at least, were all running off of a tiny little 8-bit microcontroller. And man, if you ever want to see a microcontroller code that is pushing it to its absolute limits, where you're counting individual bytes, you're counting clock cycles, you're counting everything, go look at Marlin for the AT Mega. I want to say it's like, what was it? Was it the Sanguino? Was that the variant? It might have been the Sanguino. But anyway, those things are taking out everything to the point where like if you want to add auto bed leveling or something, it's like, hey, here's some other functions that you got to take out. Like people took out arc support. So like printers used to be able to take an arc perfectly and you'd send one command saying, hey, move from point A to point B with this radius. And then we decided like as a community, okay, that takes up a lot of space and computation power. Instead, we're going to put auto bed leveling in its place. And now the slicer needs to break up that arc into a bunch of individual lines. And that's our trade-off. So like those were the compromises made. So
a great example of this is the loss, the power loss stuff.
Yeah.
It was so intensive, both if your memory card sucked, that was the other issue too, but it was so intensive on these 8-bit boards that they would kind of jitter and lag, if you will, and you would see your printer stop for like half a second. You see these little blobs on a print. And that was always what the answer was. We've talked about it on Print Fix Friday plenty of times where you see blobs on your machine at a relatively reasonable interval. It's because it's trying to write things and it's like having to stop, do the writing, then it can keep going. Yeah, we did a lot with a little back in the day. And quite frankly, I'm still surprised there are as few house fires in this industry as there have been. Because man, some of those old machines, jank is being really nice. Like really nice for how bad these machines were. But now with 32-bit and 64-bit, you've got so much more opportunity to add things, and that's where, you know, the influx of RFID and NFC happened. JL Stern's asking why RFID and not NFC? Is that just because that's...
No, that's a phenomenal question. That still hasn't been answered yet. So I can tell you pros and cons, and honestly, if you guys want to weigh into the Discord or GitHub group that's in there and voice your opinions, it'd be greatly appreciated. So the RFID, specifically called MyFair, is what's already used by Bambu printers. So if you were to copy that and use MyFair again, then if Bambu decides down the road to say, okay, we're going to remove the signature requirement, now their printers are already capable of reading these tags. So all they have to do is basically push out a firmware update, and now third-party tags can be used. If you switch to NFC, it's technically a different standard, which means that it may not be as easy as a software fix, depending on how they implemented it. NFC and MyFair are very similar, so a lot of times readers can
They'll do both,
read from
kind of
both of
thing.
them.
Yeah.
But if you're really trying to cut costs, it might be very specific to that type of tag. So effectively, if you change to NFC, it's harder for existing, specifically just kind of like Bambu, because they're kind of the monster that's already in the RFID space. No one else is as big as that.
No.
But then basically you might say, all right, we're pushing NFC because we like that you can use it on Android phones and stuff, which I think is a very cool part.
Yeah.
But then you might not be able to use it on a Bambu printer without adding another RFID reader, depending on how they actually implemented it in hardware.
And that's where things start to get a little bit complicated, where, okay, so I can use NFC, but now I have to have a supplemental reader, and now I got to input that into the current reader system and somehow get it to recognize it. And if you're going through all of that work, you might as well just spend the extra money and get, the actual firmware at this point.
Yeah, so I mean, that's the trade-off, is really just, hey, they started this, they started RFID. Do we copy it exactly the way that they did it, or do we scrap it and do what we think would be right if that didn't already exist? And that is a tricky discussion. That being said, if the hardware slash software is looked at a little bit more, it may just be as simple as a case of saying like, oh yeah, it's actually capable of reading NFC. This is a non-issue. But it just hasn't been confirmed yet. This is all something that is really just a time suck. So it's like everyone that's in these groups are all like, if you ask about a feature, like for example, this KDF, the key derivation function to read these tags, that has been like on the cusp of being completed for so long. It just wasn't honestly that big of a deal because we could already read tags. It's like, okay, what extra functionality does this get us? And it wasn't that desirable of a thing. So like time was put into other things. And then once this was done, now it's like, okay, cool. Now that the work is done, here's all the cool things that you can do. Now you can have an Ender 3 reading a Bambu tag, but that in and of itself wasn't the motivation needed to reverse engineer it. So same thing with the hardware of the RFID reader. It may be capable of reading NFC, it may not. And it's kind of a lot of work to go into something just to answer a yes, no question for trying to do backwards compatibility, which may not be worth the time.
I like it because this is like it's like the ethical hacking for all the right reasons, because there are people that will want this to be cracked for the wrong reasons. Then there's your group, the people that you lovingly called yourself the PM of the project. You're the one saying, look, I just want a standard. I will help us move through this system, but I'm not the cracking expert. I'm not this, I'm not that. I will help make sure that this continues and moves on, because that is a big problem that we have in the industry of open source. I'm not going to paint with a broad brush, but I'm painting with a broad brush. A lot of us get bored of things very quickly, and that tends to be a bit of neurodiversity getting itself out there from time to time. And if we can't find the solution, we'll say F it and move on. But we could be right there and not know. And this KDF was one of those big steps, right?
Yeah, and to reiterate on this, because there's probably a bunch of people from the group watching.
Yeah.
I treat myself as like a technical journalist on this whole thing. So I joined this group because I was interested. There's tons of people that join every day, and they ask the exact same question, like, "Hey, can I create custom tags or whatever?" And as soon as I joined the group, I asked the same question. So I was that annoying person that jumps in and says something, and there's a few people that are in that group that will answer it every single time, and they are a godsend, honestly, because like without them, it would just be really
you need like a bot that searches for that question and just replies.
So I started coming in and watching as people were coming in, asking the same questions, and then turning around and doing the exact same projects. And they were doing the same thing. Like, hey, I wrote a script that parses the data that's on the tag. So now instead of it just being a gobbledygook of binary data, you can actually see, hey, the hotbed temperature should be this. And then I was like, that's really cool. I saw it for the first time. And then like a month later, I watched somebody pop in, ask the same questions, and do the same thing. And I was like, oh, that was a waste. It's already been done. You don't need to do that. And then I watched somebody else do it. And by the third time, I was like, okay, this needs just to be known. That's all it needs. Like, it's been done. If you scroll through the Discord, it's all in writing somewhere. It's all knowable. It's just not easily accessible. And the first thing that I did was kind of like parse through the Discord group, find all the stuff that had been discovered that hadn't been documented, and then I documented it. And then I like to make a lot of videos. I'm more of like I like to go on shows like this. I like to do podcasts.
Yep.
So I just started documenting it and kind of making it known to the world. What needs to be known? Where is the state? Everyone always ask that. They're like, what is known? What is being worked on? What is not known? And what do we know we just can't do? Like, are there things that we know we've hit brick walls that are never going to happen per se? So that was kind of where my role was just kind of, I don't know, driving up hype, which in doing so got every time that I post a new video or something, there's always like more people that trickle in. They'll be like, hey, I saw your video. This is interesting. So like, I hope that that gets more developers in there and stuff like that. And I hope that people see this, they're interested in it, because there's always help needed.
Every time.
So more people bringing in would be potentially nice. I mean, I can't give credit to myself for that if they find it for something else, but that's kind of like my little way of helping along, just making things known, making it documented, hopefully. I still do have some videos that I'm being pressured to make, like writing RFID tags. That has been known for a while. I've done that myself. And there's a lot of people that come in all the time and are like, hey, how do I write my own RFID tag? And I'm like, it's complicated. I don't have my notes from the last time I did it. I just need to like refigure it out for the second time, publish a video on it, and then I can just link that video anytime somebody asks.
That's like, literally, this is why we started our YouTube channel in the first place, was we needed a space for the knowledge that we had, because we kept getting the same questions over and over and over again. And that's how we started a 10-episode podcast that is currently at episode 211. So, you know.
Oh, yeah.
There's that. But as Mr. Catlett is saying, said Discord is actually very well searchable. The problem is people don't search and or don't know how to use Boolean logic. Chris, all you had to do was just say people don't use logic. You didn't have to go there say, oh, they don't know how to use Boolean. No, they don't know how to use logic sometimes, okay? Yeah, Discord can be, and it can be crazily overwhelming too if it's an active server, right? Just like try to keep up in like the Polymaker Discord and not mute half the channels. Good luck. That's why I actually really like the Polar Filament Discord, because it's active enough that I can easily follow along. I can help when I can help, and then I can go off and do my own thing and check it twice a day, and it doesn't like completely obliterate my day trying to get back on track. But RFID to me is something that the more that I get into the professional hardcore side, right? Like we're looking at a powder printer right now. And the more that I'm looking into this more, I'm like, okay, fine. Like, so it's between HPMJF, the SAF from Stratasys, a very small used EOS, because I cannot afford that one full price, and a Formlabs Fuse 1 Plus. The problem with that one being it's very tiny for our needs. But, you know, we're looking at all that, and pretty much every one of them is locked down to some extent. And outside of Stratasys, they all have abilities to run open materials. But you pay for it. So they're RFID to an extent, then they don't have to be anymore, which is an interesting concept. And I think Bambu has played the game correctly, right? Where they said, you get extra functionality of just like auto recognition with our spools, but you don't lose any major functionality. And that's where RFID is great. Now, how close do you think we are at writing tags that the machine will understand?
For Bambu, you can clone them.
You can just straight clone them.
Write them. Yep. Okay. So basically, since the signature needs to match the data,
right,
you can exactly clone it. But as soon as you change anything in there, then it doesn't work. So that's already done. I've done that myself. The reason I haven't like prioritized a video once again is because like that's not what I'm interested in doing. I'm not interested in cloning. I don't want to sell polar filament tags that are just a clone of a Bambu tag. I don't want to say, hey, this thinks it's a Bambu PLA or something. Like I want to do it the right way.
Yeah, that
So
that is
that's
very much the wrong way to do it if you don't want to piss the company off.
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where I've discovered it was possible. I have no interest in pursuing that. A lot of people do want to be able to do something like that. They're like, hey, I've got Overture filament that's orange. If I tell it that it's actually bamboo orange, that works enough for me. Sure, go for it. I don't care. So like the documentation, it it exists. It's not concise, or like in tutorial form. Like it requires knowledge of both how RFID works, how the Proxmark 3 works, and to some extent how the project itself works. So I will make a video on something like that. So you will be able to clone it. That's one of the things that a lot of people like to do is, especially now that things are readable, they just create dumps of their tags. And there's like, hey, I'm going to take all of my tags, I'm going to read all of them, and I'm going to like post them wherever, which people want to do that, go for it. But now that the KDF is figured out, has become trivial to read. You can just like tap them on the reader and you're like beep, 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 and you can just read them. Whereas before you used to have to do that crazy setup in the middle, run scripts and pull the data and reverse like brute force tag keys and stuff like that. So now it's way easier for people to dump tag. So if you have an RFID reader, literally any type of RFID reader these days, if you have a flipper or a Proxmark or even those cheap little RFID readers that come with an Arduino starter kit or something like that, you are more than capable of reading and dumping tags if you want to. So you're more than welcome to do that.
Is there a value in having a vast library of orange bamboo filament tags, right? Will that help understand the signature and how it's done, or can there be an issue with too much data at some point?
This is outside of the stuff I care about.
Mm-hmm.
Having a library is going to be more of a personal thing. I consider it like a toolkit. I'm like, hey, this is out there. If somebody can think of a good reason to do it, that's fine. But if somebody thinks of a good reason to have a library, but there isn't a library, then you're in trouble. So it's kind of like, hey, well, we're learning all this stuff, posting it, it's fine. For a while, it was very valuable to learn what the contents were on the tag itself, because like there's strings looking at it. Like if it says the word blue, BLUE, you know what that means. So even if you're just looking at raw data, you can say, hey, that's probably the color name. But some of the more like precise stuff that's in there is like tray ID and stuff like that. It's like one of the things that's in the tag. And that was a little bit weird. There's stuff called like XCAM info. And it really just kind of looks like garbly goo until you have a little bit more tags and you can see how they vary in between things. There's like manufacturer date. I think even, I don't know if they produce like line ID, like the filament, like what machine it was produced on. I don't think they do. That might just be the open source standard. But just the more that you have, the more you can compare them and say, hey, I've got 5 spools of orange PLA. They're all theoretically identical to the user, but I'm going to compare the contents of the RFID tag and see what has changed between them. And that helps you learn. And you're like, all right, whatever this is, it's not a different material. It's not a different color. It's not different manufacture or processing temperatures or anything like that. It would be things like manufacturing date, manufacturing time, any other sort of manufacturing differences that would only exist between spools. I don't know if they keep track. They might keep track of the facility that it was produced in. I'm really foggy on this because like I looked at all this stuff and then created the open source standard, which I know a lot better than the Bambu standard, but it is all documented. So
Documentation
like
is
what
important.
facility it was made in. So I like wrote it down. I'm like, all right, now I never have to revisit this again. So.
BLD, thank you for the 5 gifted memberships. Nick got one. Timor got one. Time Lord with THYME. That's actually that's a pretty good name. Matt B got one and Rafa got one. Thank you for the gifted memberships. So let's talk about the open standard then, since that is very much what you want to push. Let's do a high level understanding of not just what it is, but why.
Yes. So what it is actually, there's a lot that goes into it, going down to what data lives on the tag, what the tag itself should be, where the tag should be on a spool. Because like if you're building these printers and you need to read it, you need to put your reader in the right location. So it's basically just trying to standardize any potential variances that we could figure out. Like if somebody's going to start putting RFID things on, like I think Creality put their tag at a different location than Bambu did, which is already just like, that's one of the reasons I want this standard is because even if it's capable of reading a different tag, it might not even line up with the reader. So it won't even be physically in the right position to read the tag. So yeah, physical requirements is one big thing. And then the actual data that lives on the tag is one part, but also making sure that it's extensible is another one. So making sure that we're preparing for the future, making like saving space for something that might grow. One challenge right now is kind of deciding what information is important. So like if you're going to have a lot of filament producers are very low tech, honestly. Like it is very hands-on, pushing buttons and turning dials and stuff. It's not necessarily computers running these things for a lot of companies.
Right.
So the lower tech companies aren't going to be able to store stuff like a unique serial number per se on their spool. So they don't know what the serial number is. So the question is, should serial number be stored on the RFID tag? And if it is stored on the RFID tag, should it be considered something mandatory? Or is that going to be like extra info? And then more importantly, stuff that's considered extra info today might be considered mandatory in the future. So like, I'm going to use HueForge as an example. There's transmission distance.
Yep.
Transmission distance is essentially how much light can shine through your plastic. So if you have a company that actually measures that, they can obviously put that on the tag, but most companies might not. But if HueForge continues to grow, that might become something that is a de facto standard. Like it's kind of like, hey, what's the point of making filament if you're not going to print the transmission distance on the tag? So then that might move its way into the required stage or something to like meet the standard. So example of required is going to be the material name, maybe melt temperatures or something like default print temperatures, bed temperatures, maybe the size of the spool, like things that are really, really easy to do are going to be required. But yeah, things like transmission distance is going to be potentially an extendable thing.
Right.
Maybe even dry temps. Like, should dryer temps be something that we say you have to have this on the tag to be compliant, or is that like extended? Is that optional? Because that is going to change people's use cases. Because if it's an optional format, then maybe filament dryer companies aren't going to put RFID on their filament dryers because they're like, what's the point if only some people put that info on the tag? But once again, if you have to put all that info on the tag, that's more work for the filament manufacturers. And then the filament manufacturers might just say, well, I'm not going to do it because I can't do all that easily.
F it, because that's more work and we're already running thin margins and God knows what the next few months are going to look like for those margins anyways.
Yep.
Yeah. That's been a fun one. That's Yep. So the open standard then is designed to theoretically work with any brand, right? Or as many brands as physically possible, but also be simple enough that a manufacturer who is not currently operating in that space, if you will, to be able to relatively easily operate within that space without things becoming messy. Is that like the right kind of the right goal here? And like, dude, as someone who by and large on the consumer side is very anti-DRM, because I've seen DRM initially pushed as, oh, it's just to make things easier, and then it gets locked. And screw you, you can't use anything but our stuff, Stratasys. That to me is that's when people say, F it, you're gonna do this? Fine. Now we're really gonna figure it out. The open standard keeps all of this from happening because it's not that you're trying to actually write with Bambu's signature. You're trying to write a completely separate signature that the machine will recognize to make life easier on who's using the machine.
Yeah, signatures are something that has been discussed. Should that live on the open source tag? Because signatures are good at verifying that it's genuine. So like if I put a polar filament tag out there, you can say, hey, this is signed by Polar Filament. I can prove it is and it hasn't been tampered with. The question is, does that matter? That is an open discussion. I don't know the answer to that because like I really don't care right now. Like I don't want to lock anything down. Signatures can be used to lock things down, or they can just be used as like a seal of approval. Like, yes, this is genuine. It's not like respooled by some weird third-party place that I don't even know. I don't know how you get counterfeit filament, but that would be the example for that is counterfeit filament. But
I've actually got a decent example for this, right?
Okay.
Buying filament refills and using an old spool, right? that would be a great case where if I have, I'm going to use Polar since it's your company, and I'm going to use it because it makes the most sense right now. If I had a spool of Polar, it was done, and I respooled something else on it, and I want to change it. Now the tag would go from a Polar filament sign tag to recognize as a generic, right? Yep. So the machine, instead of saying, oh, this is Polar PLA, this is generic PLA. So as soon as you change that signature, it doesn't delete the tag, but that certificate of authenticity goes away, and it now just gets recognized as a generic variant. That, to me, solves every single issue here. How that's possible? I don't know. Not my problem either. I might have just feature crept the project quite a bit, and there's like some guy who's taking notes just flipping me off across the PC like, screw you, this is so much extra work, but it's not a bad idea.
I mean, this is where the standard comes in. I want to hear everyone's opinion, because is it possible? The answer is almost always yes. Does it make sense? I don't care.
And that's the thing. Does it make sense in the long run to go through and do it, right? Like, does X1 Plus make sense for the average user? Well, I don't know. It depends on what you're doing. Does utilizing Bambu filament because it auto-recognizes it in the machines worth it to you? And you pay a premium to do that. Do you care? Maybe you do, maybe you don't, right? This is what I love about this community is if this doesn't have any impact on you, great. Who cares? This is awesome. I'm glad that it doesn't. But if it does, you now know exactly where you can go and how you can get it.
Yeah, I'm curious to see, like, basically in the future, if every spool of filament comes with an RFID tag and you just have these, I'm curious what projects people are going to make out of it. Like, if there's like, hey, I just realized all of my filament has these RFID tags. I have a brilliant idea. Those are the things that I want to enable, because RFID is one of those things that does, like I said, I've said it a million times, it does not work unless everybody is doing it. And which is one of the reasons this hasn't come out yet. People have done RFID tags in the past for 3D printers. It just never got widely adopted.
No, because it's always been used the wrong way.
Yep.
I legitimately think Bambu's like the first company to use DRM in this industry in as close to the right way as I could want, right? Literally the one thing that we're missing is that ability from them as a manufacturer to provide other manufacturers with the standard. But I also totally understand why they didn't. It is a feature that allows them to sell their materials at a higher cost, might I add, than other filament brands out there, and be able to say, this is our materials, these are our tuned profiles, various rates on tuned. But you know, then the issue that we run into is actually last time we spoke of, what is it actually made out of? Because Bambu PLA is not pure PLA. It has definitely got some stuff in it. But the value there is, well, you know what you're going to get, right? You know, you don't know what's in it, but you know what to expect. That's the important part of the whole thing.
Yeah, that's been a huge thing. So I'm going to move forward to some very R&D stuff, probably not coming out for the next couple of years here. New printers now focusing on speed have taken requirements of filament to the next level. Yes, so it is no longer just what temperature does it print at. Before, be like ABS, what temperature do you print it at? This. PLA, this. PETG, this. Now, like, the melt flow is starting to matter. Softening points are starting to matter. Drying temps, I mean, that never mattered for a long time. No one cared about, hey, am I going to fuse my filament together if I dry it at the wrong temp? But in order to push out these things, especially the TPUs that are getting more and more popular, outside of hardness, there's also elasticity of it as well. There's a lot of other things. So like there's a lot of TPUs that are non-crystalline structures or that need to be crystallized, and they're really complex. And that's one of the reasons that they haven't taken off, is because someone has to have a pretty in-depth knowledge of what the plastic is that they're working with in order to print with it. Yep. So if any of that complex info could be put onto an RFID tag to the point where the printer can just understand it and update it, that would make these newer complex materials become mainstream a lot quicker. People always ask about like ABS and ASA, why they're not more popular, and they're like, they just work. And I'm like, if you've tuned it. The other thing is, side note, ABS and ASA pellets, the raw material, cost way less than PLA.
Way
But
less.
buying
Yeah.
the material is more expensive, and it costs us more to make it because we only run it like once a month or something like that, whereas we're running PLA every day.
And styrene
So,
just stinks. There's nothing fun about it. At least ASA
yep.
is a little bit, easier on the nostrils, but I can't imagine what your shop smells like if you have just one line running ABS. The whole shop's got to smell terrible.
We have like air fume extraction stuff that goes on there, so I don't want to have employees that are just breathing it stuff in all day.
Oh, come
So
on. That's just a class action lawsuit by the time you're in your 70s, so who cares?
exactly.
That's
But
that's a whole nother chat that we need to have, whether that's with you or with someone else, but talk about like the potential health risks involved with 3D printing, the atomization of the microplastics, and that if you can smell your machine's printing, that's not a good thing. There's a problem. There's a big problem. That's the kind of stuff that I'd love to dig into one day. I am waiting for UL to start cracking down. They haven't yet. They've put out some reports, but I don't really think that they're well, scientifically standardized. But certainly, it would be a cool topic to really go into one day.
it's complex for sure. Cool things that are coming out. Like yesterday, we ran an experimental batch of a biodegradable TPU.
Yep.
So I am really excited about that. It worked. This is the first time it has worked. I do a lot of R&D, and it is maybe 90% of them fail. So it's very exciting when something actually works. So we did 2 R&D batches that both worked in the same week, that never happens. One is made from recycled tires, actually turns into a plastic that you can print with, even though it's rubber.
Does that smell good? I don't. That's either going to smell really good when it's like that smell of the new tire smell, or it's going to smell terrible.
It does not smell terrible anymore. The first revision smelled horrendous.
Did you have
There's a lot
butylene
of
in your
things.
first revision?
I don't know the details of it. So
Okay.
that's like more like where the NDA stuff comes in, and they're like, "Do you
Yeah.
need to know this?" I'm like, "I don't need to know it. No, that's fine. Just don't even tell me. It's easier." But yeah, basically each revision of this has been like, okay, how can we reduce the smell? How can we make it print easier and stuff like that? So those ones actually just went out to beta testers on Friday. That filament. So I'm waiting to hear. I heard a few of them already in chat. So some of them already know what it is. And then the Bio TPU is the one that is going to start going out to beta testing pretty soon. This one, I'm actually really excited for it. Usually any sort of bioplastics are just a pain to deal with, and this stuff, it has its quirks. I still have a lot of stuff I need to iron out to make this like mass producible, but nothing that like prevented it from like working or not working. So I'll probably end up sending one your way, Grant. I've got a bunch of like YouTubers on the list. I just got to make sure that the company that produces the plastic is okay with kind of announcing that. We just made a small batch, just like 25 kilograms of it. So there's not a whole lot. So I don't want to like drum up hype about something that you can't buy yet.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's another version of it. So the stuff that we just made was the Bio TPU 95A. So it's a really flexible stuff. True 95A, not
I was gonna say
Amazon 95A. We
you,
measured
sir. This is actually one of the reasons that I love Polar, is because you have that certain level of, I'm putting 95A on it because I have the testing equipment and I know it's 95. I'm not just calling it 95 and it could be a freaking 40D, right? I know what it is because I tested it and I'm ensuring that it's the same. Yeah, so if you're not in the Polar Filament Discord, do yourself a favor and get in there, because Mitch actually shares way more than I would have ever expected in that Discord about like the little nuances of what it takes to get something right. And the TPU was a big one for me, and I really enjoyed that whole talk that you had in there.
I've been doing a lot with TPU. So regular TPU, we have a 60D. The Bio TPU is 95A, but we also have a biodegradable TPU 60D that we're going to be trying, I think, tomorrow. Tomorrow's Monday. Yeah, tomorrow's Monday. So
Nice.
if you want to see disasters happen, great place to do is in Discord too, because I post not just our successes, but our failures in there as well. So it's always interesting to see. That being said, I mean, I always hope that everything goes well, but I never count on it.
And hey, if it doesn't go well, as long as the cameras are rolling, that's what matters at the end of the day, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, that's always the fun one. It's like, I want this to go right, but it's kind of better for content if it goes really poorly. And I'm like, but then I have to clean it up if it goes really poorly. We're going to be starting a testing series and I have to build a testing apparatus, and I have gone through like jank, like tying it to a tree and a winch level of testing apparatus. I'm like, that works, but it's not all that accurate. Now we're going to be building something a little bit more accurate than that, but still kind of janky because there are certain things that I'm just not smart about. So if you happen to know a lot about electronics and would like to help us understand a little bit more about load cells and how to log them, I would love some assistance on that.
We just made like an impact tester for the TPUs. So you can buy a lot of impact testers. I know you can buy stuff that will do what this does, but a lot of like plastics like PLA and ABS, you can do like a standard, what I'm going to call it an off-the-shelf impact tester. Impact testers only work if they break the material. But the problem with TPU is it's a lot harder to break. So it needs to be a lot larger and a lot scarier. So rather than buy it, we kind of like jerry rigged our own. I took like a 6-foot 2-inch steel rod, which weighs a ton, by the way. And then we just hooked it up and we actually mounted it to some of our shelves that we had on just a swinging pendulum, and then just had it like annihilate these plastics. And that thing, when that swings, that is heavy. So
he posted these videos in the Discord, by the way, and they're just hilarious. Like, you guys are giggling when it hits it. It's great.
It sounds like a gunshot when it hits. It's just like bam.
Yep.
But we had to break it. And honestly, it wasn't even big enough. We got most of our stuff to break, but once we started getting to higher densities, like 90% density, it wasn't breaking them. So effectively, I can't test that. It doesn't do me any good if it doesn't break, because I need to see how far it swings past after it breaks.
How strong is it? Yes.
Yep.
The answer is yes. Chris Elliott and Nick are saying that I should like try to work with CNC Kitchen or My Tech Fun. Maybe. I'm not going to work with I could work with CNC Kitchen, but my apparatus will be way jankier than his. So, yeah. I don't know. Part of me also just wants to learn it, but then I need time. Yeah, so there's that. Hotfix is saying, I've heard of Polar Filament before, but never tried it. If they have some Black Friday sales, I'll certainly try it after hearing what I heard today.
Yeah, we actually have our biggest Black Friday sale. So our normal stuff is like $18.99 for Filament, but we're going to do $9.99 for Black Friday. So it's going to be sub $10, no minimum requirements or anything. So check it out.
Can you like at a certain point include a note for significant others that lets them know this was a very good price and they should be okay with, a 30-kilo order? Because unless you have some really nice greens, then I can probably bribe Amber with a couple of nice spools of green. But
yeah, just like a price sticker and be like, this pure PLA normally costs this amount. We sell it normally for this amount, and even that's crossed off when we're doing it on sale.
Honey, I'm literally losing money if I don't buy this, okay? Like, I'm losing money.
Just do a thing and be like, if you tag me on a TikTok post, then I'll include a receipt that says each spool used to cost $200 and now it only costs $9. So
crap, Amber's in the chat. The jig is up.
You'd be stupid not to try it.
Now that would actually be very funny, where you include like a fake receipt for significant others and show it's like $200, but you use this special coupon. Now, that would be funny.
Say it was mismarked.
Winslow Joy is asking, when's that go live? What are you expecting to be releasing and doing all that?
It's going to be on Black Friday itself. If there's anything left over on Cyber Monday, which I really don't expect there to be, I will do it on Cyber Monday as well. So for context, these are the spools that are going to be $9.99 are going to be our transition spools. So those are going to be anytime that we switch between filaments and stuff like that. They're marked as mystery spools on our website. So effectively, it'll be a lime green, but it won't be the exact lime green that we were going for and stuff. So I've been saving those for the last year here to basically do a Black Friday sale for. So we've got hundreds of them, thousands, I don't know, somewhere in there. We have like giant shelves that are just full of these, and it's hard to tell where transitions start and actual one stop, whatever. So yeah, as soon as those are gone, they're going to be gone. We do have a ton of them, but I just don't think it's going to survive more than one day.
Little Nepomuck asks if you're shipping to Europe.
We occasionally ship to Europe, but not standard.
It's very expensive.
It's very expensive. We don't have stores over there. So like, I mean, if anybody in Europe ever wants to be a polar reseller, like now is the time to ask for it. But that's something I have not explored or anything like that in Canada and stuff. So we're officially pumping out serious amounts of filament. So it makes sense to have distributors. But once again, shipping by pallet or shipping individually is just really expensive to go across country borders.
Yep. Nepo, I know you're going to be in my area in the next few months. I'll just give you my address to ship it to my house, and you can come pick it up when you're here. That's fine. You know, we'll get that. I would bring it over to you, but I've already committed to bringing quite a few things over to Smurf this year. I have no idea how many Ember prototypes plates are showing up, but it's more than a couple that we're already taking over. So I'm already worried for my package allowances this year. So yeah, Nepo, if you want to get some, I'll just give you my home address and you can just ship it to me. And I promise I won't open the box, so it'll still be a mystery when you get it. But yeah, we'll make it happen.
If anybody is going to Smurf, I already promised, it was CNC Kitchen's intern. His name is Jan.
Jan Tech. Yep.
I promised him 3 of our newest R&D spools, but instead of me shipping it to him, if somebody wants the equal amount of what I would pay in shipping worth of filament, I will give you filament to deliver filament to Jan if you're going to Smurf, because I know he is.
I will have to see how much room I have. I don't need any extra, but Jan's a friend, so I'm happy to help out how I can. But yeah, you know, like that's cool. See. It's the same thing with Ember. Ember's like, yeah, I'm not going. Who wants to be a courier? I'm like, I got you, dude. He's like, you want a plate? And I'm like, I mean, sure. At dealer's choice, he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to send you a Prusa XL plate. I'm like, that's like $100 plate. How many plates are you sending me? Yeah.
Yep.
Chris Elliott says, I think I might need to contract with a freight forwarder, send a small container. It's a little late for that, but you know, we could. So yeah, this week and then next week's probably gonna be our last podcast for like a couple of weeks. That's gonna be interesting. Yeah. Nepo says my luggage from my US travel will be sweets and filament. That's on brand. So what is the current big challenge right now that you guys are actively trying to find people that know more about in this RFID, cracking side of things?
In RFID, the big thing that I need right now is something on the hardware side of things that uses RFID, because that is the only reason I haven't started making tags on the filament yet. So if there is a single 3D printer company that says, yeah, we will put an RFID reader that can read your tags on it, that is the last thing that I need to do to kick this off. And I think that is the catalyst that is needed. Because then once one thing is out there, now I know so many filament manufacturers, and I'm surprised how like we're not competitive with each other as much as we are buddy. We always get drinks anytime we like meet up and stuff. So I know a ton of filament manufacturers that are in the same boat as I am. They're like, I will start putting tags on this the moment that somebody can actually use them, because I'm not going to start making them for no reason. So if we know any 3D printer company, even if they're a small guy or something like that, they're not one of the big name brands, that would be enough for me to start pumping these out. And then at that point, now it's just a matter of more filament brands jumping on board and more printers jumping on board. And I think it would just kind of like take off from there. No one wants to do that first jump, that first step.
Yeah. It's so funny. Like, I know there are RFID tags and Prusa spools, but I know there's no value to them to end consumers. Prusa literally uses them for internal. It's for tracking the spools internally. But there's no reason that it also couldn't get utilized in the open standard, but it's in the middle of the spool, like in the middle of the cardboard. There's no like actual, it's not where all the other readers are.
Another thing too is just making a mod that goes mainstream too. So like if somebody's got Ender 3s and they put a RFID thing on there, I will hype that up. So if you make that type of thing and you make your printer be able to read this type of thing, I will try to drive that as much as I can. And then if more people start modding their printers to take those RFID tags, then hey, that's another big thing. So I know big hackable printers are going to be like a lot of Creality and Prusa printers and stuff. I know Big Tree Tech too is like really big into the like the world of, I don't know, I'm going to call it like really crazy add-ons for stuff. So like, I mean, they're like, hey, here's our multi-material unit. And to my knowledge, I don't think it has to work with any particular printer. There's
Nope,
like,
it's
it
just
exists.
Clipper.
So like,
It works for Clipper.
yeah. So like something like that would be huge too. So, I mean, I don't know anyone from Big Tree Tech. So I see them in, yeah. So like that would be a fun conversation to have. They seem to be interested in what the community says. So.
Oh yeah, dude, I'll connect you with Luke. That's easy. That's easy. So all right, we now the Clipper fanboys are coming out, right?
Yeah.
Make it a part of Clipper. It will be a standard. It'll be a standard day overnight. JL Stern says. Cybertech says I'm with JL Stern. Put it in Clipper. Berlin says, yeah, get it in Clipper mainline and it will trickle down to all Clipper printers. DaVinci 10 says, Spool Man, dude. To have Spoolman integrate with this stuff too would be just absolutely insane. It'd be awesome. It'd be awesome.
If somebody knows that, jump in the Bambu RFID research Discord group. You're gonna have to hunt around for it because like there is a link buried in the like issues on GitHub. So like go to GitHub, search through the issues, and just like search for a Discord invite. I don't think anyone has ever like publicly posted it, but that's usually where people trickle in from. But yeah, if you post that and you know anything about like what it takes to get something kind of merged into Clipper or whatever, that would be sweet. I just have never done any dev work on Clipper before.
Yeah, I haven't either. I've broken Clipper before, but that's all that I've done with it. Now we're seeing Box Turtle because of course that's the open source project that LDO is doing a lot with for an open source AMS, the Box Turtle. And Malat's asking, what about Octoprint/Clipper plugin for Raspberry Pi RFID readers? Because then you could theoretically put the reader wherever you need, or you could have multiple readers at all the different locations. That'd be pretty valuable too, right?
Yeah. I mean, the software is the easy part, at least for me. I'm a software developer. It's mostly going to be that hardware support. So like, hey, what reader are you going to choose, and how is it going to plug into the microcontroller? Are there extra pins for it? Do we have extra like GPIOs, or is it going to talk over like serial or I2C or SPI or whatever? That's more of like the physically making it, physically printing an enclosure for it or something, and physically slapping it on your printer in a nice packaged way instead of just like taping it on and having cords hang everywhere. I think that's really the part that it would take to get mainstream. In the same way that when like auto bed leveling came out, like you can buy the sensors really cheap, but like getting them professionally integrated into your printer took a little while, and it took quite a few revisions. So,
and dude, like flashing firmware on an old Ender to give it, bed leveling capabilities. That is the sole reason that we don't do printer firmware flashing for people. I will not do it. I won't, because the likelihood of bricking boards because you screwed up, nah, man, it ain't worth new motherboards and all the new wiring that has to come with it. It's just easier to, in this day and age, go buy a newer printer that it's going to cost you less in time. Hybrid Robotics asking, have any other filament manufacturers bought into this? I don't think so. Have
yes.
They? Oh, they
yes.
have.
Yes. And everyone's waiting for that first move. So I've talked about it. I will like fly out to people's places and help them integrate RFID into their production process. There's a lot of people that are like getting stuff resold from China and stuff. And I will do everything that I possibly can to get them set up to do it. Cause at a simple sense, it's just adding an RFID writer to the end of your process line. A lot of filament companies pre-print all of their regular labels, the like brand labels and stuff. So I'm hoping that at its simplest stage, if you want to take the lowest tech option, it'll basically be something like that. It's going to pre-print off a bunch, whatever batch of it's going to be. You're going to have like 300 RFID tags that are all yellow PLA, your brand or whatever, like the bare minimum. So that way they're all identical. Yeah. They're not that fancy, but that is basically ground zero for getting this on your project. And then if you need to reuse them, you can always reprogram them if you don't end up using them. So that is step one. Doing anything that's going to like integrate it directly into your filament line, that like if it's doing any sort of data logging, like printing the actual spool tolerance or whatever onto it, that's going to be a little bit more complex. But generally the people that have machines that can do that are the ones that added that support. So they shouldn't have too much of a difficulty adding RFID into there. I'm just trying to like figure out, because ours does do all of that. We're just trying to think about the like QA status of that and making sure that like if a label doesn't print, you can physically see it. But if QR code doesn't program, then you don't see what the QR code looks like. It still looks the same.
And like that, that'd be kind of cool if you could like program the QA of the spool itself into it, and then as the spool is unwinding, your extrusion multiplier is actively being adjusted to change things. That would be super cool.
Yeah, there's tons of options, and it all just depends on how technologically advanced each producer is, really. So
yeah. Huh. There's a lot of opportunities with this RFID stuff, isn't there?
oh yeah, that's why I'm excited. I want to put it out there. Once it's accessible, then that's where the ideas can fly. It's a tool in the toolkit. So once it's out there, you can come up with your own ideas.
Mad Cat says, everyone wave to the random background dude.
Oh yeah, it's his shop.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there's a guy just walked in, looked over for like 10 seconds, then walked back off the shot. I was gonna completely ignore it and see if anyone in the chat recognized and saw the guy in the background. It's funny because he didn't show up 100% on the vertical format, but he showed up on the widescreen format. Chris Elliott says, I suspect you can't/don't want to say what other filament makers are testing it. He said, but he hopes printed solid. We've seen people ask about Polymaker. I think it would be really, really nice to see a standard come out. Regardless if we initially get it utilized in the machinery, like in the machines themselves, I want to see spools provide more information outside of like the QR codes, right? The QR codes are nice. You know, most companies at this point have some level of tracking on the QR code. But to have something that is an RFID or an NFC where I, as an end user, could, you know, make it happen, I think would be pretty awesome.
Yeah. So at this point, basically all I'm asking is that people show interest in it, because like it's still a loose standard, which is going to be really tough to launch, because at some point you have to say, hey, we're going to launch it at version 1 right here, and it is what it is to get it out the door. But I get that it's still a loose standard. So if somebody's like, hey, I'm interested, I want to do it, but I don't know exactly what I'm doing. That's kind of where we are now. So like from my end, I'll be the first one to launch it. I will take whatever risks associated there are with that. And then as soon as somebody else is ready to essentially tag along and do the exact same thing, then you can. So at this point, I'm like the list of people that we're hearing are just saying, hey, that sounds really cool. Whatever it takes to do it, I'm interested. I don't know what that means yet, but I am interested. I would love to have RFID tags on our spools. So
right.
There's a bunch of filament companies. Way more have reached out now in the past 24 hours after posting the video. So I still have to like confirm, but there is a list on that actual standard that has a list of all the backers that are on there. Right now there's 3. So there's Polar, Filament, 3D Fuel, and Ecogenesis Biopolymers. There are really big names that have already reached out and said, I'm interested, or I'm forwarding this up to management, or whatever. So once I get like an actual confirmation from them that they're like officially interested, then we'll add those names to that list as well.
Yeah, if you can send me the link to all that, I'll add it to the video, because I did not put it there since I don't have it handy.
It's, if you search Bambu Research Group on Google, you will find it. There's a GitHub link. It's the first thing that pops up when you search Bambu Research Group.
I'm going to pull that right now. Yep, there it is. Sweet. Oh, see, there you go. There's decent SEO. You know, you can go ahead and get that done.
Yep. So specifically on there, the open source RFID standard should be like a file that's on there or something. There's only a few files that are on there. It's all documentation. So that's part of that.
Is where's your video going to be?
My video?
Yeah. Oh, it'll be on your private YouTube channel, won't it?
I don't know. every time I create like short form content, I usually post it to TikTok and Instagram. And then my YouTube channel is usually like the nitty gritty details. So like if you did watch my RFID video, it was very like high level and just saying like, hey, really cool things are possible. My YouTube channel is going to be like, okay, you're sitting down, you want to read this. Here's the code. Here's how the code works. Here's how to compile it. Here's how to read it. It's like more tutorial for developers and not like mainstream hype, I guess. So it's very much educational. So once I get that on there, that'll be on there as well.
Man, you got a short with almost 8 million views on it. Nice.
Which one is that? Is that for YouTube or is
yeah,
that
on YouTube? It is the tiniest thing I've ever soldered. Has 7.9 million views. That's a large amount of views.
I think the largest I had was 25 million. So
jeez.
That was for a vending machine that I hacked to make it like you could type in stuff on it and do like little Easter eggs. So
nice.
You could type in like cabbage and it would say my cabbages and then sound like it was going to self-destruct. So
I mean that's a good meme. That's a proper meme. David Connor Shover with the $10. Thank you, sir. Greatly appreciated. And guys, leave a like if you haven't yet. If you're still watching, please like the stream. So the video then that you posted recently, that'll be on like TikTok and Instagram then, so people.
Yeah, it's on TikTok and Instagram under Polar Filament.
Okay.
So I can't post it to YouTube Shorts because they have a 60-second limit and it's like 1 minute and 20 seconds. So
they shouldn't anymore.
I just tried it and it said that it was limited to 60 seconds. Instagram isn't. Instagram used to be limited to 60 seconds or so, I think. I've had Instagram videos get cut off. Those don't even warn you. You just post it and then everyone complains, why did you cut the video off? I'm like, oh crap. Forgot that it cuts it short.
Hyper Robotic says there's just a single video on Polar's YouTube channel. Yes, I'm looking at Mitch's YouTube channel because it's very easy to find it. You don't even hide it, which is fine. But yeah, I am curious to see what comes off of this, right? The system's been cracked. We can now read the KDF, and now it just comes down to how do we create the signature that the machine can read and not get pissed off at, right?
Yeah, I'm hoping that if I had to guess where this goes, my hope is that now that you can read RFID tags, I'm hoping that people mod their own third-party printers to read Bambu RFID tags, which then gets the ball rolling on RFID readers on third-party printers. Once that exists, then it's basically trivial to read a different type of tag and be like, okay, well, I'm launching this open source tag. Now you can adapt the product to read that. So we are in the stage of we need printers with RFID reading hardware on it. That is where everything is. So I'm hoping that this is that kick in that right direction.
I can dig it. Kurt is saying, consider an adjunct to your standard that had a web API to grab the same data based upon the spool QR code through a web interaction. I can read. Yep, I can read. That might speed up adoption, and that's fair. It absolutely would speed up adoption. So I like it.
Yep.
I like the idea too. So yeah, Mitch, thank you, dude. Thank you for coming out and talking about this. Is there any final thing you want to leave with the folks at home, or anything you want to talk more about?
Nothing that I can think about, but if anybody wants to bounce questions off of me, our Discord is the best place to do it. So if you just search for Discord, or polarfilament.com has a link to our Discord. So if you go there, then you can always talk to me. You can talk to tons of other people that are super active. So I pretty much read that stuff religiously. And that is a lot of the inspiration for why I do what I do. When people say something's important, that's what I investigate. So if you want to have your voice heard, that's where to do it.
Now I'm curious as to what I would find important, because like I've gotten used to not using RFID or any DRM for that matter, but it would be super cool. It would be super cool if we could. JL Stern says, y'all hiring.
Not right now. We get asked that a lot. There is an official like hiring process. So if people send their resumes to us, then we have to just say, sorry, we don't have any open positions right now, but we'll hold on to your resume. So we put it in a folder and we reach out when we are. That being said, because we're a pretty public facing side of things, we do get a lot more requests for positions than it takes, which is great from my end for hiring. It makes that way easier, but it also makes it quite a bit more competitive.
Yep. Yep. Chris Elliott with the $5.42 saying random money for random things. All right. Yeah. You know what? I'm here for it. Yeah, it is funny because we don't post public applications anymore. I just mention it in YouTube videos, and it is
Yep.
so much better. It's like, if you got this far in the YouTube video, you probably don't hate listening to me, which means you probably pass at least part of the test to work in 3D Musketeers, which is deal with the fact that I never shut up. Right? And at that point, hey, we're like right there. Duff said, do employees need RFIDs? Do I need to get one of those like subdermal NFC?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah,
whatevers?
we do. You have to get an embedded RFID tag and a QR code tattoo. Those are the only two requirements. I think that's pretty easy. Just kidding. No,
Guy comes in with a temporary arm tattoo of a QR code. It just takes you to a Rickroll. I think that might be an instant hire. There's got to be the cheat code for the instant hire there. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm gonna publicly say please don't do that. If I have a bunch of people walking in the door saying, "Look, I got the QR code," then I'm gonna be left with a tricky situation.
Mr. WizX says, thank you, Grant and Mitch, for sharing all the info. So thank you, Mitch. I put the I did put the link to win some filament, but I did say just made in America filament because I didn't know if you wanted to give away some filament or if I should just give away some printed solid filament. It's up to you.
I'm fine to give away. I'm always open to, like, we were talking about that. We're going to start doing some giveaways more often on just influencer pages. We haven't decided what that means. I've already told you about that, Grant. So the offer remains open. So you can do.
Well, you're here, so
per video. So
why don't we give away? I don't know. You choose how many spools you want to give away, and
yeah, I can do.
I've
already gotten clearance for 2 spools on any stream, so I can do that without having to ask. So Perfect. 2 spools in it for now.
We'll do some 2 spools. You guys know how this is going to work. We're going to do our sign off. Stay with us. We're going to give away some filament, but that way the people that are listening audio only don't have to deal with this. So that is all we have for you all today. Thank you for coming out, listening, and potentially helping out as well. Stay safe out there. Don't forget to call your loved ones. And as always, keep making awesome. Have a good one.
Yeah.
Okay, let's give away some filament here. You ready?
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna trust you on this. I got to run here, so
okay.
Whatever it happens to be, I'm just gonna send you coupons for it, so you can just forward those out. So if you can send me a Discord message just now, so I don't forget. Otherwise, I'm gonna go home and completely forget about it. Okay. But just say, okay, reminder for filament codes, and I'll get those to you as soon as I get back home. But I got some parts to machine here. Actually came out here for a reason.
All right, go back to work, sir. We'll see you later. Take care.
Yep, see ya.
All right, it's just me now. All right, let's give away some filament here. So I got to figure out, I'll just mark them different colors because technically this isn't going to, if you win this, you can still win printed solid filament another week. So this one is going to be open to literally everybody, and you're you're stay for the giveaway. You gotta stay for the giveaway. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close entries here. 56 people entered. You had plenty of time. All right, let's pull the names. What's today's date? The 24th? All right. 24th. Down to there. Anybody can win. Shuffle it a few times. Got to make sure you do the math right. If you don't do the math right, that ain't on me. All right, let's see if they did the math. This always takes a second. I'm sorry for it taking a while. TJL, if you are in the chat, I mean, you put it in like literally 3 minutes ago, so you're probably in the chat. I'm going to mark these blue for polar. TJL, you get a spool of polar, and let's see who our second winner is going to be. Let me make sure they did the math right as well. They probably did. They've worked with us before, I think. Where's the name? Where's the guy? Dang it, I always do this where I can't find the name. Give me a second. I gotta find the person's name again. Ah! That's literally the worst part. Awesome. We got another winner. James the Printer. You get a spool of polar filament. We'll get those out to you all. They're coupon codes, so it should be nice and simple. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. So yeah, I think this was a great chat about RFID. It's been cracked. Now the step, so now that we can fully read everything, now the step is either potentially working with Bambu or finding a way that the machines will, you know, make it work. So anyways, leave a like, get subscribed. We're going to send you over to Mr. Steve Builds himself so that you guys can go hang out with him and see what he's going to be up to. I think he's working on a salad fork again today. Yep, part 5 of the salad fork. So, see you all later. Let's go hang out with Steve. Take care. Thanks for coming out.